By 1940, aircrews operating over North Africa were documenting the same problem. Heat cooked men faster than wounds. Water ran out first. Maps lied. Uniform rules didn't stop sand from cutting skin raw. Regulations tried to control weight, discipline, and proper equipment. But crash-landed crews didn't negotiate with paperwork. They bartered, scrounged, borrowed, and sometimes stole because the desert punished anyone who treated the kit list like a guarantee. These are the 7 banned desert survival kit items used by RAF and Luftwaffe aircrews. Number 7. Extra water tins. Rationing rules breached for survival. RAF orders in the early Western desert campaigns treated water like payload. In 1939 to 1941, weight limits were enforced on sorties out of places like Mersa Matruh and the Strip at Sidi Barrani. Official issue was meant to be controlled, measured, and predictable. Extra tins weren't encouraged, and in some units it was quietly discouraged as unnecessary weight. But desert crews learned the math fast. A forced landing didn't ask how clean your paperwork was. So men carried extra water anyway, square tins tucked behind seats, wrapped in rags to stop rattling, sometimes bought in local markets, sometimes acquired through favors with ground crews or swapped between squadrons. RAF No. 274 Squadron left notes in unit accounts about extra water turning a bad day into a survivable one after downings and long waits for recovery parties. And then came the downside. Some pilots took risks to get more detours to known wells, arguments over stores, and the occasional quiet theft. Water kept you alive. It also distorted judgment when you were already tired and scared. Number 6. Captured enemy canteens. Looting logistics, survival necessity. Both air forces had policies against using enemy equipment. The logic was simple. It complicated supply and inspection, risked disease, and in some cases created identification problems if you were found with the wrong gear. On paper, the rule was clean: don't carry it. In the desert, the rule got gray. Canteens were canteens. If you'd walked away from a crash or bailed out near a skirmish line, you used what you could get. Luftwaffe crews, short on reliable water containers during fast moves, sometimes carried captured British canteens, especially when they'd learned the British patterns were less prone to leaking and heat. Around the Sollum area in 1941, after the back-and-forth fighting on the frontier, there are documented instances of German airmen found with British water gear. Sometimes it was tolerated. Sometimes it triggered disciplinary action, because it looked like looting instead of survival preparation. The benefit was obvious: a container that held water and didn't fail. The risk was just as real. If the canteen leaked, or the source was contaminated, you didn't just lose comfort. You lost time, strength, and the margin needed to walk out. Number 5. Civilian compasses and maps. Navigational aids through loopholes. Official navigation doctrine assumed you'd follow issued charts and instruments, and that aircrew training plus standard equipment would be enough. RAF crews had service maps, course headings, and procedures for dead reckoning. In theory, anything civilian was unvetted and potentially wrong. It didn't belong in a regulated kit. Then the coastline disappeared under haze. Then the desert offered nothing but repeating shapes. Crews started adding their own aids, small civilian compasses, locally printed road or survey maps, even tourist-style references bought in towns along the supply route. They weren't replacing RAF navigation. They were patching holes in it. Number 203 Squadron, operating on raids around Benghazi, specifically documented crews supplementing with civilian maps and compasses to cross-check bearings and landmarks when standard references didn't match what they saw out the canopy. Sometimes it worked exactly as intended, an extra reference that got you back to the sea, and then to base. Sometimes it backfired. Civilian maps could be outdated, place names could be off, and a cheap compass could drift. One wrong assumption, and you weren't a little lost. You were burning fuel into empty space. If you were flying that run, would you trust the issued chart, or the map you bought yourself? Number 4. Private pistols and fighting knives. Unofficial arms in hostile landings. Regulations on personal weapons were tight for a reason. Issue sidearms were controlled, logged, and tied to training and conduct. Extra pistols and big knives raised problems: accidents around aircraft, theft, and, crucially, what happened if you were captured. Leadership feared that extra weapons could escalate a bad contact into a deadly one. Yet crews still hid them. Some RAF pilots and ground attack crews men in units like No. 112 Squadron operating in the Western Desert slipped private pistols into kit bags or strapped fighting knives where a quick search wouldn't find them. The thinking wasn't heroic, it was practical. If you landed near an isolated track, you might meet a rescue party. Or you might meet someone who saw your watch, your boots, and your water. There's a reported case of an aircrew successfully fending off hostile nomads long enough to break contact and reach help. But the same logic could ignite diplomatic trouble fast. A confrontation that might have ended as negotiation could turn into shooting, and suddenly your survival tool became an incident with consequences far beyond one crew. In the desert, weapons didn't guarantee safety. They guaranteed a choice under pressure. Before we move on, if you were down on the sand with one broken compass, one hot canteen, and strangers on the horizon, what do you prioritize first? Navigation, water, or a weapon? Tell us below and subscribe. The next 3 are even more personal. Number 3. Sun goggles and face veils. Visibility versus protection, and the price of improv. Air forces tried to keep kit standardized for a reason. Goggles were supposed to be issued and inspected, with lenses that wouldn't shatter into the eye and straps that stayed put under airflow. Face coverings were treated as optional, even suspect something that could interfere with oxygen gear, communications, or identification. Then the sand found the gaps. On the ground after a forced landing, wind-driven grit didn't just stain. It abraded. It got under eyelids. It turned a long walk into a slow injury. So crews bent rules. RAF men bought civilian motor goggles in Cairo. Luftwaffe crews scrounged workshop glasses or used aircraft fabric as makeshift veils. Scarves were cut into strips and tied behind the head. Some even darkened lenses with soot or improvised slits in cloth to keep glare down. Sometimes it worked perfectly. You kept your vision, kept moving, and didn't waste water on swollen eyes. But there was a trade. Poor lenses distorted distance. Fogging and heat rash happened fast under tight cloth. And a badly chosen veil could turn breathing into a fight at the worst possible moment. Number 2. Locally bought headscarves. The uniform stopped mattering before the heat did. Uniform regulations were about discipline and recognition. Headgear was issued in approved patterns, and foreign or civilian clothing was discouraged, sometimes explicitly forbidden because it blurred identity, complicated inspections, and fed a fear of men going native instead of staying military. Crash land in North Africa, and that logic feels far away. A locally bought scarf wasn't a costume. It was shade. It sealed the neck and ears where sunburn turned into sores. It blocked sand from the mouth when you had to breathe through your teeth. Crews picked them up wherever they could: markets near airfields, trades with drivers, swaps with local laborers. Methods were simple. Wrap tight over the scalp, tie at the back, pull a tail across the nose when the wind rose. It helped. Men lasted longer without blistering, and they stayed functional enough to navigate or signal. But it also carried risks. In mixed areas, it could confuse friend and enemy at distance. And in capture, improvised local clothing could be read as espionage theater instead of survival pragmatism. Number 1. Additional ration packs. Extra calories, extra weight, extra temptation. Ration issue was controlled like ammunition. Aircrew packs were designed around short-term survival and limited space, with known contents and strict weight assumptions. Extra food was often discouraged. It added bulk, it spoiled in heat, and it invited hoarding and uneven distribution inside a squadron. But in the desert, hunger wasn't just discomfort. It was bad decisions. Crews slid extra items into bags anyway: hard biscuits, tinned meat, dates, chocolate, even locally bought flatbread wrapped in cloth. Luftwaffe airmen sometimes carried additional iron rations beyond the official allotment, especially when rescue timelines were uncertain. RAF crews did similar, trading with ground staff or pooling bits from multiple packs before long sorties. The success case is quiet but real. More calories meant clearer thinking, steadier walking, and less panic when the horizon refused to change. The failure case was brutal. Food increased thirst. Tins cut into already limited space for water. And if a pack burst or spoiled, you carried weight that gave you nothing back. Every rule in a survival kit is a guess about the future. Not malicious, just incomplete. In the desert, crews didn't break regulations to feel daring. They edited a plan that didn't match the ground, one scarf, one tin, one hidden item at a time. Sometimes that edit bought hours. Sometimes it created a new problem. If you want World War II history without simplification or mythology, subscribe. More stories like this are coming where doctrine meets pressure, and the small choices do the real work.